I woke up on my kitchen floor at 3 a.m. with no memory of how I got there. When I checked my purse, $8,000 in cash was missing. Then I saw the security footage of what my son had done. I never thought I'd wake up on my kitchen floor at 3 in the morning, but there I was, my cheek pressed against the cold linoleum, my mind swimming in a fog so thick I could barely remember my own name. The last thing I remembered was sitting at my kitchen table with my son Derek, sharing a cup of chamomile tea before bed, like we had every night since he'd moved back in with me 3 weeks ago. My body felt like it was made of lead. When I tried to sit up, the room spun violently, and I had to grip the edge of the counter just to stay upright. Something was terribly wrong. At 72, I've had my share of dizzy spells, but this was different. This felt like I was swimming through molasses, fighting to stay conscious. That's when I noticed my purse lying open on the floor, its contents scattered across the kitchen tiles, like pieces of my life thrown carelessly aside. My hands shook as I crawled toward it, my knees scraping against the rough surface. My wallet was there, but it felt wrong. Too light. I fumbled with the clasp, and my heart stopped. The emergency fund I kept in cash, $8,000 I'd saved over 2 years from my Social Security checks, was gone. Every single bill. Hey, beautiful soul. Before we dive in, show some love with a like, tap subscribe, and tell me, where in this big, beautiful world are you watching from? But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing my late husband, Harold's gold watch, was missing from the small dish on the counter where I always kept it. The watch I'd held in my hands every morning for the past 5 years since he died. The one I'd wind gently while whispering good morning to his memory, gone, along with my wedding ring that I'd taken off to wash dishes the night before. My house keys were nowhere to be found either. The spare set I'd given Derek when he moved in. The ones he'd promised to return when he got back on his feet were gone too. I was trapped in my own home, confused and violated, unable to even call for help because my phone was dead and the charger was in my bedroom upstairs. The stairs might as well have been Mount Everest in my condition. It took me nearly an hour to drag myself to the living room, where I kept my old landline. With trembling fingers, I called my sister Maggie, who rushed over with her spare key, the one Derek didn't know about. She found me sitting on the couch, still in my nightgown, tears streaming down my face as I tried to piece together what had happened. "Mabel, honey, we need to call the police," Maggie said, but I shook my head. I couldn't believe it. Not Derek, not my boy. There had to be an explanation. But when Maggie helped me check the security camera system that Harold had installed years ago, the one Derek had complained about being paranoid, we saw the truth in grainy black and white footage. There was my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, carefully pouring something from a small bottle into my tea while I stepped out to get cookies from the pantry. Derek had drugged me. Derek had robbed me. Derek had stolen the most precious reminders of the love I'd shared with his father. And as I watched him on that screen, pocketing my cash and Harold's watch with the casual efficiency of a practiced thief, I realized this wasn't his first time. This was the moment my world shattered completely. Derek wasn't always like this. I need you to understand that. When I look back at that security footage, I see a stranger wearing my son's face, but the little boy I raised was different. He was my miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages when the doctor said I'd never carry to term. Harold and I had given up hope, and then Derek came into our lives like a gift from heaven. Those early years were pure magic. Derek was the kind of child who brought me dandelions from the yard and called them mama flowers. He'd curl up in my lap while I read him stories, his small hand tracing the words on the page as if he could absorb them through his fingertips. Harold would come home from his job at the steel mill, and Derek would run to him with such joy, such pure love, that it made my heart ache with happiness. But then Harold died in that car accident when Derek was only 8 years old. One moment I was a wife, planning our 25th wedding anniversary, and the next I was a widow, trying to explain to my boy why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. Derek didn't cry at the funeral. He just held my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, Mama. I'll take care of you now." And God help me, I let him believe that was his job. I worked double shifts at the library during the day and cleaned offices at night, coming home with my hands raw from industrial cleaning chemicals and my feet screaming in protest. But Derek never went without. When he wanted to play baseball, I bought him the best glove I could afford, even if it meant eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights in a row. When he needed new school clothes, I made sure he had them, even if I wore the same 3 dresses to work for 2 years straight. I told myself I was being a good mother, giving him stability after losing his father. But looking back, I think I was trying to fill the hole Harold's death had left in both our hearts. Every sacrifice felt like love. Every yes felt like healing. When Derek struggled in high school, I hired a tutor I couldn't afford. When he wanted to go to college, I took out a second mortgage on the house Harold and I had worked so hard to pay off. After college, Derek started his construction business, and I was so proud. My boy, building homes for families just like we used to be. But the business needed capital, and Derek looked at me with those same eyes that had once traced words on storybook pages. "Just a loan, Mama. I'll pay you back as soon as the first job comes in." I signed over $28,000 from my retirement fund without hesitation. When Derek married Sarah, I gained a daughter, and later 2 beautiful grandchildren. I thought our family was complete again. But the business struggled, and Derek's requests for help became more frequent. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Always with promises to pay me back. Always with explanations about delayed payments from clients or unexpected expenses. Sarah tried to warn me once, speaking quietly in my kitchen while Derek played with the kids in the yard. "Mabel, you need to know Derek has a gambling problem. He's been hiding it from you, but it's getting worse." I should have listened. Instead, I defended my son, telling Sarah she was just stressed from the divorce proceedings and didn't understand how hard Derek was working. Even when Derek showed up at my door 3 weeks ago, divorced and claiming he just needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet, I opened my arms without question. I cooked his favorite pot roast, washed his clothes, and gave him the same unconditional love I'd given him since he was that miracle baby who called dandelions mama flowers. I loved him so completely that I couldn't see what he'd become. And that love, that blind, desperate love, had nearly destroyed us both. The first sign something was wrong came during Derek's second week staying with me. I'd always been an early riser, but I started waking up to find Derek already at my kitchen table, my checkbook open in front of him, studying it with the same intensity he'd once reserved for his homework. When I asked what he was doing, he'd smile that charming smile and say he was just helping me organize my finances because he was worried I might forget to pay a bill. At first, I felt grateful. After Harold died, managing money had become overwhelming, and having Derek's help felt like a blessing. But something about the way he snapped the checkbook shut when I entered the room made my stomach flutter with unease. Still, I pushed the feeling down. This was Derek, my boy. He was just trying to help his aging mother. The phone calls started around the same time. Derek would get calls at all hours, and he'd step outside to take them, pacing my front porch like a caged animal. Through the window, I could see his face contorting with anger, his free hand gesturing wildly as he spoke in hushed, urgent tones. When he came back inside, I'd ask if everything was okay, and he'd wave me off with increasing irritation. "Just business stuff, Mama. You wouldn't understand." The dismissive tone was new, so different from the respectful way he'd always spoken to me before. But I told myself he was just stressed about getting his life back together after the divorce. Then came the questions about the house. Derek started making comments about how big it was for just one person, how the stairs were dangerous for someone my age. He'd point out every creaky floorboard, every loose handrail, as if he were building a case against my ability to live independently. You know, Mama, there are some really nice assisted living places around here. Sarah's grandmother loves hers. You'd have people to talk to, activities to keep you busy. The way he said it made my skin crawl. This was my home, the place where Harold and I had built our life together. Every room held memories. Every corner held our history. But Derek spoke about it like it was just real estate, just square footage that could be converted to cash. His requests for money became more frequent and specific. First, it was $500 for car repairs, because his truck wouldn't start. Then, it was $1,200 for back child support, that he claimed Sarah was threatening to take him to court over. Each time, he had a story, a reason, a promise to pay me back from his next construction job that was always just around the corner. But when I mentioned these loans to my sister Maggie during one of our weekly phone calls, Derek's face darkened. Maggie's always been jealous of our relationship, Mama. She's trying to turn you against me because she never had kids of her own. He started intercepting my calls, telling Maggie I was resting when she called, or that I was having a bad day and couldn't talk. The day my checkbook went missing was the day I should have known for certain something was deeply wrong. I tore the house apart looking for it, convinced I was losing my mind. Derek helped me search, his face a mask of concern, asking gentle questions about whether I'd been feeling confused lately. When the checkbook mysteriously reappeared on my nightstand the next morning, Derek suggested maybe I should let him handle my banking to avoid any more stress. I found him going through my mail one afternoon, sorting through bills and bank statements with the efficiency of someone who'd done it many times before. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was just trying to help, and that I shouldn't worry about complicated financial stuff at my age. But the most chilling moment came when Derek started asking about my insurance policies and my will. He brought it up casually during dinner, wondering if I'd updated my beneficiaries since Harold died, suggesting we should make sure everything was in order in case something happened to me. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, so calculating, made me realize my son wasn't just helping me manage my life. He was preparing to take it over completely. The morning after, I found myself on the kitchen floor. After Maggie and I had watched that horrifying security footage, I knew I had to dig deeper. My hands shook as I called my bank, asking them to send me copies of all my recent statements. What I discovered made my blood run cold. 3 checks, each made out to cash, each signed in my shaky handwriting, but clearly forged. Derek had been practicing my signature, getting better at it each time. The first check for $600 was clumsy, almost childlike. The second, for $800, was more confident. The third, for $1,000, was nearly perfect. $2,400 stolen from my account over the past month, and I'd been none the wiser. But it was the timing that broke my heart. Each check had been cashed on days when I'd been especially kind to him. The first one, the day after I'd made his favorite chocolate chip cookies from scratch. The second, after I'd driven him to a job interview and waited in the car for 2 hours. The third, the morning after I'd told him how proud I was that he was getting his life back together. He'd been stealing from me while I was loving him. When Derek came home that evening, I was waiting for him at the kitchen table, with the bank statements spread out before me. I'd rehearsed what I would say, how I would give him a chance to explain, how I would listen with the patience I'd always shown him. But the moment he saw those papers, his entire demeanor changed. "You went through my things," he said, his voice flat and dangerous. Not denial, not surprise, just cold accusation. As if I were the one who'd done something wrong. "Derek, these are my bank statements. You forged my signature." My voice came out smaller than I'd intended, but I forced myself to continue. "The sleeping pills, the cash, Daddy's watch. How could you do this to me? What happened next will haunt me forever." Derek didn't apologize. He didn't break down and beg for forgiveness, like the troubled son I'd imagined he still was deep inside. Instead, he laughed, a bitter, cruel sound that I'd never heard come from his mouth before. "You owe me," he said, leaning forward with his hands flat on the table. "Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you? Staying here, taking care of you, listening to you talk about Daddy like he was some kind of saint? You've been a burden my entire life, and now it's time to pay up." The words hit me like physical blows. But Derek wasn't finished. He told me he'd been telling people around town that I was losing my mind, that I'd been forgetting to pay bills and getting confused about money. He'd already spoken to a lawyer about getting power of attorney, claiming I was no longer competent to handle my own affairs. "And if you even think about calling the police," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I'll have you declared incompetent and stuck in the worst nursing home I can find. You'll never see this house again, never see your grandchildren again. Is that what you want?" With that threat hanging in the air, Derek grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, but not before taking my jewelry box from the dining room hutch, the one that held my mother's pearl earrings and my anniversary necklace. "I'll be back for the rest of what's mine," he called over his shoulder, and I believed him. After Derek left that night, I sat in my kitchen for hours, staring at those bank statements until the numbers blurred together. The silence in the house felt different somehow, heavy and thick, like the air before a storm. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, his footsteps on the stairs, but there was nothing, just the sound of my own breathing, and the grandfather clock Harold had bought for our 15th anniversary, ticking away in the living room. I didn't sleep that first night. Instead, I wandered through my house like a ghost, touching familiar objects, as if they might disappear too. Harold's reading glasses still sat on his nightstand, where I'd left them 5 years ago. His coffee mug, the one that said "World's Best Dad," that Derek had given him for Father's Day when he was 10, still held its place of honor in the kitchen cabinet. Every corner of this house held memories of the family we used to be. And now those memories felt poisoned. The second day, I couldn't get out of bed. I pulled Harold's old robe around me and lay there, replaying every moment of Derek's childhood, searching for signs I'd missed. Had I been too lenient, too giving? Had I created this monster by loving him too much? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, picking at my confidence until I felt like I was falling apart from the inside out. I barely ate. Food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach churned with anxiety every time I thought about what Derek had said. The threat hung over me like a sword, and I found myself checking the locks obsessively, jumping at every sound. What if he came back? What if he really could have me declared incompetent? What if I lost everything Harold and I had built together? By the third day, I was ashamed to admit, I started to believe maybe Derek was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. How else could I have missed the signs? How else could I have let my own son drug me and rob me? I felt stupid and old and helpless, exactly the way Derek had wanted me to feel. But then, I found Harold's letter. I was going through our old photo albums, torturing myself with pictures of Derek as a baby, when a folded piece of paper fell out from behind a family portrait. It was Harold's handwriting, a letter he'd written to me during his last hospital stay before the accident. One I'd forgotten existed. "My dearest Mabel," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm not there to tell you these things myself. You are the strongest person I've ever known. You held our family together when I couldn't. You made our house a home, and you loved our son with a fierce devotion that amazed me every day. Don't let anyone ever convince you that your love was wrong or that your strength is weakness. You have more courage in your little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. Trust yourself, sweetheart. Trust your instincts. And remember that real strength sometimes means knowing when to walk away." I read that letter 3 times, and with each reading, something inside me began to shift. The fog of self-doubt started to clear, replaced by something I hadn't felt in days: clarity. Derek's behavior wasn't my fault. His choices weren't a reflection of my failures as a mother. They were his choices, made by a grown man who had decided to prey on the woman who'd given him everything. I thought about Sarah's warning about Derek's gambling problem. The warning I'd dismissed because I couldn't bear to see my son as anything other than the victim of circumstances. I thought about the phone calls, the secrecy, the way he'd isolated me from Maggie. This wasn't desperation or temporary weakness. This was a calculated pattern of manipulation and abuse. For the first time in 3 days, I got dressed. I made myself a proper breakfast. And then I picked up the phone and called the one person I should have listened to from the beginning. "Maggie," I said when she answered, "I need your help, and I need you to know that you were right about Derek all along." Maggie arrived within the hour, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. She sat at my kitchen table while I laid out everything: the forged checks, the security footage, Derek's threats, and most importantly, his promise to return for the rest of what's mine. My sister's face grew harder with each revelation, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened, occasionally reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Mabel, honey, we're calling the police right now," she said when I finished. "And then we're calling a lawyer. Derek committed multiple felonies, and he's not going to get away with it." The attorney Maggie found, Patricia Coleman, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in elder abuse cases. She explained that Derek's actions constituted not just theft and forgery, but also elder abuse, assault with a dangerous substance, and criminal threats. "Mrs. Richardson," she said, "you have more power here than you realize. Your son made a critical mistake in underestimating you. The first step was documentation. I gave the police copies of the security footage, the forged checks, and screenshots of Derek's threatening text messages. They filed charges immediately and helped me obtain a restraining order that would keep Derek away from my house and prohibit him from contacting me directly. But I wasn't done. If Derek thought he could intimidate me into silence, he was about to learn how wrong he was. I called my bank and changed all my account numbers, passwords, and security questions. Every financial document Derek had ever seen was now useless to him. Then, I went to a different bank entirely and opened new accounts, transferring everything Derek didn't already know about into secure holdings he couldn't access. The next step was protecting my home. I had a security company install new cameras, motion sensors, and a system that would immediately alert the police if anyone tried to enter. I changed every lock, installed deadbolts on doors that had never needed them, and made sure Derek's key would never work again. My house became a fortress, and I was no longer a victim waiting to be robbed. But the most important move was the one Derek would never see coming. I called Sarah, his ex-wife, and told her everything. She wasn't surprised, just deeply sad. "Mabel, I'm so sorry. I should have tried harder to warn you." Through Sarah, I learned that Derek's gambling debts were far worse than I'd imagined. He owed money to dangerous people, and he'd been using my address to apply for credit cards and loans, banking on my good credit and reputation. I reported every fraudulent account to the credit agencies and the authorities. Derek's carefully constructed web of financial deception began unraveling, and he had no idea it was happening. Then I set the trap. Knowing Derek would return when he got desperate enough, I prepared a surprise for him. I moved all my real jewelry to a safety deposit box, but left a jewelry box filled with costume pieces in my bedroom. I installed a hidden camera with a direct feed to the police station, and I made sure my neighbors knew to call 911 if they saw Derek anywhere near my property. The waiting was the hardest part. For 2 weeks, I went about my daily routine, but every sound made me jump. I kept Patricia's number on speed dial and slept with my phone beside me. But I also did something Derek wouldn't expect. I reached out to people he'd isolated me from. I called old friends, reconnected with neighbors, And most importantly, I strengthened my relationship with my grandchildren through Sarah. Derek had spent weeks making me feel powerless and alone. Now I was surrounded by people who cared about me, protected by the law, and armed with evidence of his crimes. He'd taught me that family could betray you, but he'd also shown me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The boy who'd once promised to take care of me had become a predator, but the woman who'd raised him was about to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. When Derek finally came back, I was ready for him. Derek returned on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after he'd stormed out with my jewelry box, and his threats still echoing in my mind. I was in my kitchen, having my morning coffee and reading the newspaper, when I heard the sound of a key scraping uselessly in the front door lock. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I stayed calm, exactly as Patricia had coached me to do. The scraping stopped, followed by frustrated muttering, then the sound of Derek pounding on the door. "Mama, open up! My key's not working." His voice carried that same entitled tone, as if he had every right to walk into my house whenever he pleased, as if the past 3 weeks of silence meant nothing. I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed the panic button on my new security system and watched through the window as Derek circled my house like a predator, trying windows and rattling the back door. The cameras captured everything, and I knew the police were already on their way. When Derek finally saw the restraining order taped to my front door, his face transformed into something I'd never seen before. Pure rage, unfiltered and ugly. He ripped the paper down and read it, his mouth moving as he processed the words. Then he started screaming, "You ungrateful old witch. After everything I've done for you, you're going to regret this." He hurled the restraining order at my window, and I flinched despite knowing he couldn't get to me. This wasn't my son anymore. This was a stranger wearing Derek's face, and he was dangerous. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing. I watched from my living room window as they handcuffed Derek in my front yard, his face purple with fury as he screamed about how I was crazy and confused, and how he was just trying to help his sick mother. The neighbors came out to watch, these people who'd known Derek since he was a child, and I saw the shock and disgust on their faces as they realized what he'd become. But Derek's arrest was only the beginning. Over the next few days, the walls of his carefully constructed lies began crumbling. The police investigation revealed that Derek had been forging my signature on documents for months, not just checks. He'd tried to take out a home equity loan, using my house as collateral, and he'd applied for credit cards in my name that I'd never seen. His construction clients started coming forward after hearing about his arrest. Derek had been taking deposits for jobs he never finished, using the money to pay gambling debts. The Better Business Bureau was flooded with complaints, and Derek's business reputation was destroyed overnight. But the call that broke my heart came from Sarah. Through tears, she told me that Derek had been trying to manipulate the children against me, telling them that Grandma was sick and might not remember them anymore. He'd been using my grandchildren as pawns in his sick game, and that felt like the deepest betrayal of all. Derek's attempts to reconcile were pathetic and desperate. He called from jail, his voice honey-sweet and manipulative, the same tone he'd used as a child when he'd broken something and wanted to avoid punishment. "Mama, this is all a big misunderstanding. You know I love you. I was just trying to help. If you drop the charges, I promise I'll get help for my gambling problem. I'll pay you back every penny." I listened to his entire message, then deleted it without responding. The next day, he had Sarah bring the children to visit me, hoping their presence would soften my heart. But instead of the confused, helpless, old woman he expected to find, Derek discovered that his mother had transformed into someone he didn't recognize. Emma and Jake hugged me tight, and I explained gently that their father had made some bad choices and couldn't visit anymore. Sarah supported me completely, even thanking me for finally holding Derek accountable for his actions. When Derek realized his manipulation wasn't working, when he understood that the police weren't going to release him and that I wasn't going to save him, he finally showed his true colors. The last message he left was filled with such venom that even the jail guards were disturbed by it. He'd forgotten that the woman he was threatening had survived raising him alone, had worked 3 jobs to give him everything he wanted, and had found the strength to rebuild her life after losing the love of her life. Derek had awakened something in me that I'd forgotten I possessed, and now it was too late for him to put it back to sleep. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my sunroom reading Charlotte's Web to Emma and Jake, the same book I once read to their father when he was their age. The afternoon light streams through the windows, illuminating the memorial garden I planted for Harold in the backyard. Purple irises, his favorite flower, are blooming alongside the roses we planted together on our 20th anniversary. The house feels different now, not just because of the new security system or the changed locks, but because the fear is gone. For months after Harold died, and especially during Derek's stay, this house had felt like a tomb, heavy with grief and dread. Now it feels alive again, filled with the laughter of my grandchildren and the warmth of chosen family. Sarah brings the kids every Saturday, and we've developed our own traditions. We bake cookies, tend the garden, and sometimes just sit quietly while they do homework at the same kitchen table, where I once helped their father with his spelling words. They don't ask about Derek anymore. Children are remarkably adaptable when the adults in their lives provide stability and honesty. Derek is serving 2 years in state prison for elder abuse, theft, and fraud. The judge called his crimes particularly heinous because they targeted the person who'd loved him most. Derek's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused old woman who'd misunderstood her son's intentions, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the forged checks, the documented threats, all painted a clear picture of calculated abuse. I testified at his sentencing, something I'd been terrified to do. But when I stood in that courtroom and looked at Derek sitting at the defendant's table, I felt nothing but sadness for the little boy who'd once brought me dandelions and promised to take care of me. That child was gone, replaced by a man who'd chosen selfishness over love, manipulation over honesty. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear. I loved my son completely, and that love nearly destroyed me. I've learned that enabling someone's destructive behavior isn't love. It's fear. Fear of losing them. Fear of admitting they've changed. Fear of standing up for yourself when someone you love hurts you. But real love sometimes means saying no. Real love sometimes means walking away. My sister Maggie moved into the guest room last month, and we've become like teenagers again, staying up late, talking and laughing until our sides hurt. She's teaching me to use a smartphone, and I'm teaching her to make Harold's famous chili recipe. We take turns reading to each other in the evenings, and sometimes we just sit in comfortable silence. 2 sisters who've survived everything life threw at them. The money Derek stole is gone forever, but I've discovered something more valuable than cash. I found my voice again, my strength, my sense of self-worth. I volunteer at the local domestic violence shelter now, helping other women understand that abuse can come from anyone, even those we love most. My story gives them hope that it's never too late to save yourself. People ask me if I miss Derek, if I regret pressing charges against my own son. The answer is complicated. I miss the child he was, but I don't miss the man he became. I grieve for the son I thought I had, while celebrating the woman I discovered I still am. Sometimes love means letting go, even when it breaks your heart. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us how strong we really are. And sometimes, just sometimes, the ending of one story is really the beginning of another. Harold's watch was returned to me after Derek's conviction. I wear it now, and every morning when I wind it, I whisper the same thing. Thank you for teaching me. that I was stronger than I knew. I am 72 years old, and I am just getting started.